I've got one. I've got one hiding there, one hiding there. I've been well. Oh, great. Yeah, like just take a couple of minutes, like not a very long one. Yeah. That would be lovely. All right. So what's happening is things happening first. Your acknowledgement.
Sound check here. Can everyone hear me? Thank you very much. My name is Peter Cranwell. I'm a member of this church, the Blackwood Uniting Church, and we welcome you here. We are happy to host forums like this. Anything that we can do to engage with the community, we will. Some housekeeping, toilets. Come in from the car park, the toilets are there. That's a welcome that's a bit different in that. For evacuations, if it's necessary, look for the green exit signs. There's one down there, one here, one in the main entry, and for those at the rear, if you particularly want to, there's one out the very back door. Let's hope that's not necessary. A reminder that this is a safe place, and we would ask that you would respect all present in that regard. So now, please join me in welcoming MC today, Dr Kate Wylie, the Executive Director of Doctors for the Environment Australia. Welcome.
Hello everybody, and thank you very much, Peter, for letting us use your beautiful church here to put on our community forum. So my name is Kate Wylie. I'm a GP. I'm the Executive Director of Doctors for the Environment, and welcome to our community forum on affordable energy, where we get to exercise our democracy. And aren't we lucky to live in a country where we can exercise our democracy in a safe and respectful manner? Today we are going to hear from three candidates. We have Louise Miller-Frost, who's the incumbent Labor candidate, Nicole Flint, who is the candidate for the Liberal Party, and Joanna Wells, the candidate for the Greens Party. Give them a round of applause, everybody. It is no small thing to stand up for your community and to put yourself forward as a candidate. And it is no small thing to be in a forum like this one, where you are talking to your constituents and hearing their views. Today we will hear different points of view about different things. And so, as Peter said, let's remember to be respectful and polite to each other, because if we create an unsafe place, perhaps we won't be able to do this again the next election. Before I go on, let's have an acknowledgement of country, and I've got Catherine Hutchison here to acknowledge Kaurna land for us.
Thank you, Kate. Unfortunately, Susie, who you had organised to do this, hasn't been able to make it, so you'll have to put up with me. So I'll start by saying Namani. Nainari Catherine Hutchison, Marna Napudni. My name's Catherine, and it's great that you're here today. And I'll acknowledge country by saying Ghana Mirna Nadlu, Ghana Yarta Tempinthi Naitalia. We acknowledge we are here on the lands of the Kaurna people, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And we also extend that to any other Aboriginal people who may be here today. And I want to welcome you all, and I can't wait to hear all of the answers, and I hope you all get a lot of information today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Catherine. So the way it's working today is, before we came on, we decided the order of speakers, and we did it by drawing cards. So we've tried to be as random as we possibly can and not favour any candidate. Each candidate is, at first, they're going to give 2 minutes to give their opening pitch, and then we have 3 pre-prepared questions done by the organisers, and we are a group of 6, 7, something like that, community organisations who volunteered our time. You know, we've been doing this as a sort of an after-work exercise, so apologies if there's been any mix-ups with the time, but, you know, we're doing our best to try and create a forum for you all. We've got the 3 pre-prepared questions that we've done, and then we had more than 180 questions put forward by the community, which we, in our volunteer capacity, have then collated into theme questions. So I think we've got most of the things are pretty well covered, and again, the candidates will get an opportunity. At the end also, they'll have a minute to give us a closing speech. So each time though, they get 2 minutes to answer, and at the 1 minute 45 mark, there will be a soft bell. Soft. At the 2 minute mark, there'll be a harder bell. Okay, so that's basically how it's going. As I said, we drew cards to see the order, and then we're going to round robin it through so that each time every candidate has an opportunity to speak first, second and last. So we're not favouring anybody, we're trying to be fair, engage in our democracy. So to start off with, we have Louise Miller-Frost, who drew the first card.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Catherine, I don't know where you've gone now, for your acknowledgement of the Kaurna land, and I too acknowledge that we are meeting on Kaurna land, and it's terrific to hear Kaurna language spoken on Kaurna land. Thank you to Kate and to Doctors for the Environment, Electrify Adelaide, and Parents for Climate Change, and of course the Blackwood Uniting Church for putting this on. I ran for the first time at the last election. If you know anything about me, you probably know that I used to run St Vincent de Paul. I ran a very meaningful organisation in a job that I loved, delivering services to people across the state. But I felt that our previous government was on the wrong track, and there were a number of issues that were really very much in my mind: treatment of women, integrity, lack of action on climate change. And this was the government that had got rid of carbon pricing, which internationally is known as the most effective market-driven way of reducing carbon. They brought the coal into Parliament House to question time. Fun fact, I believe it was varnished so they wouldn't get their fingers dirty. Read into that what you will. And they'd had 22 energy policies, and we knew that there were something like 24 coal-fired power stations that had announced their closure, and there was no actual answer for how we were going to replace that energy in our system. So I came out and decided that this was actually something that was very much worthwhile me giving up my job and campaigning for, whether I won or not, because climate action is so important for our future, but also for our economy. The climate action that we have, the energy transition that we have now enables us to have green energy, green steel, green aluminium. It enables us to have industries of the future, and that's a really important part about our future for Australia. Thank you.
I thought you might have left the answers there for me, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so wonderful to see so many people from our local community here this afternoon giving up their Saturday afternoon. It wouldn't be a state or a federal election without a candidates forum at the Blackwood Uniting Church. So thank you so much to all of you, and especially to the Blackwood Uniting Church for hosting us once again. I am the 4th generation of my family to live, work, study and volunteer in our beautiful community. Our family links started here in 1920 when my great-grandfather returned from World War I, married my great-grandmother, and they settled in Lower Mitcham in a very modest war service home. They established the Colonel Light Gardens Baptist Church. My grandmother and my great-grandmother both taught at Colonel Light Gardens Primary. My dad went to school locally and volunteered, and I have continued our family tradition, which is why I very deeply care about our community and doing my very best to look after everybody. So I was the member for Boothby, your member for Boothby between 2016 and 2022. I stepped down because I had some very serious health challenges with my severe endometriosis, had a miracle health breakthrough, appropriate to be in a church to talk about that, in December 2023, and so I'm putting my hand up to represent you all again. Unfortunately, my health is, fortunately, my health is back on track. Unfortunately, our economy isn't, and the reason that we're here today is because of one of the key cost of living challenges, which is energy and power costs, which are putting up the costs of everything throughout our society, but particularly groceries. We cannot get through each day without power and food. So I'm determined to be part of fixing this for everybody, and I just want to very sincerely thank David, Matt, Kate and Jasper, who have given hours and hours of their time to put this forum on today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Joanna Wells and I'm your Greens candidate for Boothby. I would like to acknowledge country, and we are so very fortunate to be surrounded by beautiful remnant river reds, greybox, and that's here simply because Kaurna people have known for so long how to look after country, and there is much we can learn from them. I'm as concerned as you are by the multiple crises that we're facing, so housing, health and climate leap to mind. Right now, things are looking pretty grim for many in our community, but it doesn't have to be this way. We can do better, and we need to. As a community advocate, I'm incredibly fortunate to have led communities across Adelaide to save the Waitgate House, secure stronger tree laws, and push for stronger action on climate at the last federal election. I also advocate for the Greater Adelaide Freight Bypass. Some of the most amazing people I know I've met through my advocacy work, and they're all ordinary people like you and I. But I wasn't always a community advocate. I fell into advocacy because I saw that things weren't right and that community leaders were either ignoring them or actively working to achieve outcomes that failed to best serve their communities. Action on climate is one of those key issues for me. I'm a councillor on Mitcham Council and I work in State Parliament, where I've quickly learned that the capacity to influence decisions is not necessarily tied to having a majority in Parliament. In fact, we get the best results when negotiation is a necessity because governments don't have the power to ram legislation through. I'm solutions focused and I aim to work respectfully with stakeholders at all levels of government, local, state and federal, to achieve real impact. People just like you and I can be really powerful. I'm relentlessly optimistic about what you and I can achieve when we prioritise justice, inclusion and equity, when we put people first and when we push governments to do better. Thank you.
So thank you, Louise, Nicole and Joanna, for your opening remarks. We now have just a couple of questions for you. So just put your hands up if you're worried about your power bill. Hands up. Yeah? All right. And then hands up. Oh, sorry. Is that better? And then hands up if you have solar panels or a battery, or if you want solar panels and a battery if you're not already there. All right. I think we find that pretty much everybody understands how renewable energy can be a very helpful thing. All right, so now we go to our predetermined questions, and for this one we have Nicole starting first, then Joanna, and then Louise. And the question basically is that this election, Australia is again at the crossroads to decide on the future energy system that will power our nation. Around 40% of our electricity already comes from renewable energy, and will we get to our current target of 82% renewable energy by 2030, or will we change paths towards a nuclear future? So the question to the candidates is, what's your vision for our energy future, and what will your party support over the next term of government and the next decade to achieve this? And again, 2 minutes to answer, please.
Okay. So a lot of my remarks today will be focused around cost because it is the number one issue that I am hearing from our local community when I'm standing at the train stops first thing in the morning, when I'm at Mitcham shops like I was this morning, just there to listen to and hear from our local community, when I'm door knocking, when I'm at community events. So our number one aim is to get costs under control. To give you the broad overview of the Coalition and the Liberal Party's policy proposition, we want to double renewables, triple storage, and in the short term, we will provide baseload power with gas as coal transitions out of the system, and then we will replace that with nuclear in due course. We are committed to achieving net zero by 2050, but we are also committed to getting there in a way that protects our jobs, strengthens our economy, and provides reliable and affordable power. And so that's why we're backing nuclear as part of our mix, as I said, in conjunction with storage and with renewables, because we believe it's the only zero emissions technology that's capable of providing baseload power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at scale. So the difference between us and Labor's approach from our perspective is that they've put all of their eggs in one basket, which is the renewables basket. And their renewable energy target, which of 82% renewables by 2030, is very much behind schedule. So at the moment, we believe that Labor's renewable energy investment is running at less than half pace to reach its 82% target, and independent experts have said that Labor will reach 65% at very best. Now, that's why longer term, we are really, as I think probably you're all aware, are backing nuclear to get us to net zero.
As many of you are no doubt aware, more than half of coal and gas corporations pay no tax. Our elected decision makers, the people we've elected to represent us in Canberra, think it's okay to hand out over $1 billion each month to fossil fuel corporations. Meanwhile, ordinary people like you and I are paying tax like there's no tomorrow. Have you ever tried getting out of paying your tax? Is it even something you can negotiate? What could we do with that amount of money though? Just think on that, $1 billion every month. My vision for our energy future is one where every home and business has access to cheap energy provided by rooftop solar and battery storage. The benefits of this are incredible. Grid stability, lower energy bills, the capacity to charge EVs overnight at home, or to use your EV as an additional energy source to power your home. It's an end to coal and gas. It's the expansion of publicly owned renewable energy, and it's all done without nuclear. It stops the billions in handouts to coal, gas and oil corporations. The Australia Institute has calculated that the amount paid out to these corporations is enough to electrify every home in the country, every single home. It's lower power bills by transitioning to more reliable, clean energy. It's no more fossil fuel subsidies for industries except for ag. It's the creation of thousands of jobs through the transition. And that money could be really well spent. Local jobs, improved health impacts, childhood asthma dropped by 12%. That's how much of it is currently caused by gas being burnt in homes. The impacts to the federal budget are significant in the energy portfolio, and beyond them, the benefits to all Australians, to our children and our grandchildren.
Australia's lucky enough to be one of the sunniest places in the world with some of the best solar and wind opportunities, and Labor's Reliable Renewables Plan is the only plan supported by experts to deliver the clean, cheap, reliable and resilient energy system that Australians deserve. And that means getting cheaper, cleaner power in the modern grid, backed up by batteries, getting you the power when and where you need, and gas as a backup where needed. Since coming to government, we have ticked off 80 large-scale renewable projects, 80. which is the equivalent to powering over 10 million homes in 2.5 years, that is, 10 million homes. And we're on track to meet the 82% target by 2030. Now, we all know how much progress has been made when it comes to the uptake of home solar, but the benefits of that technological leap forward haven't been experienced by anyone. And that's why we took to the last election a $400 million commitment to build community batteries across Australia. We already have one at McGill and one at Edwardstown, and I know that the South Australian Housing Trust and some of the community housing providers like Junction are also looking at putting solar and panels and batteries on their homes so that people who are, not wealthy also have the opportunity to benefit from solar. We know that renewables are the future, and actually industry knows that as well. So yesterday, Rio Tinto announced that they were backing wind, solar and batteries for their Gladstone aluminium refinery. So big industry knows that this is the future, this is what is affordable for them. They also know that nuclear is not going to happen. And we know that because every credible source tells us that it's not financially viable for Australia. We know that because Angus Taylor initially said in the National Press Club that this would be self-funded, and then 2 weeks later, it had to be the taxpayers' funding. No bank, no energy company will touch nuclear. That tells you all you need to know. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we're off. We're off. So cost of living is obviously a top issue of concern for voters, and energy prices are a significant cost pressure. And, obviously the reasons for energy price increase are complex. There's war, there's the role of large energy retailers, privatised networks, and the energy grid's growing instability due to ageing and unreliable coal power plants. It's estimated that South Australia energy bills will rise by another 5.6% in July. So our question to the candidates is, if elected, what energy policies will you implement to bring energy bill relief, and when will we feel the difference? And this time we'll start with Joanna, please.
Okay, so this is absolutely doable. Access to cheap energy does not need to be and shouldn't be a postcode lottery. Every single policy choice that is made by a government or a political party is a political choice. You either choose to be inclusive and share the benefits as widely as you possibly can, or you choose to minimise who gains. It shouldn't be available only to those who are fortunate enough to be able to afford the upfront costs, yet this is currently the case. A 2019 study showed that 34% of people don't have access to rooftop solar simply because they can't afford those upfront costs. These people are the people who most need it. They can't afford to install it, and as a result, they have no choice but to pay increasingly high energy bills. This is unjust. In a country as rich as Australia, it's also not good enough. Our approach to the renewable energy transition, which is essential to addressing climate change, must also be based on justice and equity. So I'm pleased to be able to announce to you that under the Greens plan, costed through the Parliamentary Budget Office, financial assistance is going to be available to homes and small businesses so that they can disconnect from gas and install healthier, cheaper electric alternatives. What does this look like? Well, for homes, it looks like grants of up to $10,000 and low interest loans of up to $20,000. They're really significant numbers in terms of allowing you to transition to a healthier, cheaper energy source. There's similar assistance for battery storage too, to maximise rooftop solar, with grants of $5,000 and low interest loans of $10,000.
Labor recognises that the cost of living pressures and higher energy costs put real pressure on people in Boothby and across Australia. And that's why we have delivered energy price relief in the form of $300 for every household off your power bill and $325 for small businesses. The Treasurer has said that there will be more cost of living relief in Tuesday's budget and that it will be meaningful and substantial. Unfortunately, I don't have any spoilers for you. but I would expect that that would be rolled out again, but that's my guess. We've also rolled out a range of other cost of living measures, and the really fundamental thing we were trying to do in this is to ensure that no matter what we did, we were not overcooking the economy. We're actually driving inflation down, and we have been successful, and you have been successful, because obviously you are all a part of this, in driving that inflation down from 6.2 to 2.4, which has resulted in the first RBA rate reduction. So we've delivered tax cuts for 13.6 million taxpayers, cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines, stronger Medicare with more bulk bill appointments. We are very interested in energy equity, as Joanna has referred to. In terms of electric vehicles, because we've introduced the energy efficiency standards, which have been on the cards for a long time, we've finally got them there. We now have a much larger range of EVs coming into the country, including cheaper ones. We also have the APS fleet, which is all becoming electrified. That is about driving a second-hand EV market, because that is how we start getting those prices down. Most people buy second-hand cars. I drive an EV now. Prior to that, I've never had a new car in my life. We know that EV bidirectional charging, which is we've had legislation change so that can start happening, will enable much more storage across the grid, which will benefit everyone, not just those who actually have the EVs. That will mean that we have more storage and more stability in the grid. Thank you.
It goes without saying that it's absolutely critical that we have affordable and reliable power for every single Australian. So I just want to give an overview of what the reasons are that we have some of, historically record high power prices, and the latest price increases that are happening from July. So the Australian Energy Regulator has said there are a range of reasons, which includes low solar and wind output, some coal outages from elsewhere in the country, high demand, inflation, higher interest rates, which are driving up the cost of poles and wires, and an increase in bad and doubtful debt carried by retailers, and obviously individual households are under a lot of pressure. But also, it's because Labor's renewable energy only approach is not working, and their economic management is not working. There are something like an extra 5,000 South Australian families who are currently under financial power bill hardship and have sought assistance to pay their power bills. So one of the key things that we're going to do, is get inflation under control and ensure we have a balanced energy mix and stop the price hikes and spikes that we've seen under Labor. In the short term, we will ensure there is more gas in the system whilst we are building more renewables, increasing storage, but heading towards installing nuclear power. Labor's energy plan has come at 5 times the cost that they promised Australians that it would cost. We've got something like 25,000 businesses who have closed their doors. And of course, the Prime Minister promised every Australian a $275 cut in their power bill, but instead households are paying and families are paying more than $1,000 more a year under Labor's policies.
No interjections from the floor, thank you. No interjections from the floor, please. Excuse me, mate. No interjections from the floor, please. We talked about having a respectful forum. If everybody sit down, please? Thank you for coming, and thank you. All right, let's talk about transport. So the average petrol car costs us about $2.5 per year to run, and Australia does not have fuel sovereignty. Our country depends on imported petrol costing about $60 billion a year, with less than a 90-day reserve of fuel in the country. How we move around in Boothby is an important topic as it impacts our economy cost of living, traffic congestion, air pollution and health. So the question for the candidates is, what are key areas that you would invest in to make transport in Boothby easier, cheaper and cleaner? And this time Louise starts first. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So after 20 years in the too hard basket, we do now have the new vehicle efficiency standard that's giving us the same choices that overseas consumers have had for decades. We know that actually this was something that was considered under the last government, and the Minister for Urban Infrastructure, Paul Fletcher, was quite a strong advocate for it, but it never got up. We've now tripled the number of EV choices on offer since coming to government, and more than a quarter of the vehicles sold in Australia now are either hybrid or electric vehicles. When we came to government, there were just 45 EVs on the market. Now there's over 160. When we came in, there were no EV models under 40,000. Now there are 8, and we now have Australia's first EV under $30,000. And of course, as I've mentioned, driving a second-hand market in EVs is actually a really important strategy about making these affordable for everyone. We have EVs that are on the market before, SUVs, utes, didn't end the weekend. We have brands like Jeep, Smart, Leapmeter, Zeekr, Chery, some ones that I haven't heard of before. And I have an EV, and I have to say I have no problems with it whatsoever. However, EVs are not everything. We also have an active transport fund. So the active transport fund means cyclists and pedestrians have more opportunities to walk, cycle and actively move through their communities thanks to a $100 million project from the Albanese government. This was in the 2024 budget. First round opened in 30th of October, and a number of these projects have already been funded. It's about providing safe, accessible transport options that are good for the planet and also good for ourselves. The tram overpasses that we have going in at Morfett Road, Marion Road and Cross Road, plus the upgrade of South Road, all have the bike paths and pedestrian paths alongside them as well, so that people from Glenelg will be able to cycle in to the city without having to cross main roads dangerously. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
It will come as no surprise to any of you that follow and study politics that the key aspect of this policy for me as a Liberal is all about choice. We want people to be able to make the choice that suits them, their family, their needs, and also importantly, their budget. We support electric vehicles and they will always be part of the mix, but Labor's heavy-handed policies like their new emissions rules, which are directly designed to punish Australians who own a ute or an SUV, and so many Aussies do and need them for their work, that's not the answer. And industry has estimated it's going to add thousands of dollars to the cost of the purchase of a new car. We believe that vehicle policies should support consumer choice and should not punish consumers, and it must not increase costs, especially during this cost of living crisis. And we don't want to see any policies that don't deliver genuine emission reductions, because if you are forcing people to hang on to their old vehicles and not upgrade to a newer vehicle, which all of them have better emissions standards these days, then you are actually going to have the perverse income where we'll have older, higher emitting vehicles in and around our roads still, because people just simply cannot afford to upgrade their car. Again, it's all about choice, whether you want a petrol vehicle, hybrid or electric. We want consumers to have choice. We also will be having a balanced approach to our transport energy that keeps fuel affordable while ensuring our long-term energy security. We will work with industry to strengthen domestic refining capacity and supply chains. Any of you who know me know that I've been very passionate about fixing the issue with our rail freight train, so whether by hopefully one day diverting it, and that's what I've been fighting for a long time, so we can double stack, get more trucks off the road and increase passenger train transport in the hills.
So a thriving community is one that embraces diversity, equity, inclusion, and the social justice that all of these things bring. Public transport access is essential for everyone in our community, providing connections for leisure, employment, education, healthcare, and public services. No one should be prevented from participating in the community because public transport and infrastructure are inaccessible, either through design or cost. Even if every car on the road were an EV, we would still need to be concerned about the emissions that come off the tyres. This is a really, really critically important point. So we need to get people out of cars and onto public transport. We need to get big B-doubles off roads like Cross Road, Portrush Road and Glen Osmond Road, so that we can more happily walk to the bus to get to work, get on a bike, ride to the shops. Through federal leadership, significant improvements can be made in delivering accessible transport for everyone. So in a cost of living crisis, the cost of getting from A to B is putting more and more pressure on households. Close to $450 on average per week on transport, including more than $100 a week on fuel alone. We have in Australian cities some of the most expensive public transport in the world, but Queensland's recent shift to 50-cent fares has been a huge success, reducing traffic, increasing the use of public transport and saving Queenslanders millions. So it's time to roll it out nationally. Making public transport fares just 50 cents means that someone working full-time and using public transport to work pays only $5 to get to work and back home in the space of a week. So that's the Greens plan. For the average Adelaide household, this would deliver almost $4,000 a year in savings. But as Louise said, it doesn't stop here. Improved public transport sees fewer cars on the road, and the flow-on effects to our health and to budget bottom lines are significant.
So that concludes our first three questions, where the candidates were already given these, and so they had an opportunity to, prepare their responses. Now we're moving on to questions that were submitted by you, the audience, and the candidates have got a rough idea of the topic, but they haven't heard the questions before, so it gets a little bit harder now. Thank you. Thank you all for putting yourselves forward. And just make sure I'm not right, Nicole, I think you go first this time. Thank you. So, again on electrification, and this first question comes from John Denley in Glenalta, who a few years ago converted his home to an all-electric house and now is reaping the rewards of lower energy costs. If elected, is the question, what will you do to help more homes, especially low-income and rental houses, go all-electric? And again, it's 2 minutes to answer, starting with Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you. If anybody does want information on how you can fully electrify your home, I would strongly encourage you to have a look at the Electrify Adelaide website, which I have, and their information and awareness campaigns and the content that they have free of charge for everyone in our local community. It's a really interesting and informative website and covers items like, just referred to in the question actually, heat pumps for heating water, rooftop solar, batteries, electric cars, and electric stovetops. So when I hope a federal Liberal government is elected, our plan is to continue to enable the sustainable growth of renewable energy, including rooftop solar and home batteries in particular. When we were in government, our track record does speak for itself. Millions of Australians installed rooftop solar and batteries, and as I have said, and I'll repeatedly say today, our plan, if we are elected federally, is to double renewables, triple storage, and transition coal and then gas out of the system and have nuclear to replace gas and certainly coal. So we are wanting to, again, allow people to choose whichever energy sources they want for their home, because I do acknowledge, and again, being a Liberal, it is fundamental to our beliefs that there is freedom of choice. If you love cooking with gas, you should continue to be able to do so. I don't believe in telling people how they can or can't cook in their home. Personally, I took a gas stove out because I can't stand the mess and I much prefer an electric stovetop. So our plan, we'll see, and especially with renewable, that fully supports the electrification of every single household and business if that is what works for that household or that business.
Okay, so I think I pretty well answered this question early on. But here we go. We'll do a second lap around and see how we go. So this is actually a really key thing because household emissions, including the transport that gets us around, actually account for 25% of Australia's emissions. I can hear you groaning inwardly because yet again the guilt and the need to change is being removed from the corporations at the top of the food chain and being dumped on us, the end consumers at the bottom. And we're the ones possibly who feel that we have the least power. They've got away with this for a long time, but this is a great opportunity to take that control back and get the best possible outcomes. We won't make a dent in our emissions reductions unless we get household emissions under control. So, as I said, the Greens plan is to enable the electrification of households across the country. So again, that's in terms of installing solar, grants of up to $10,000 and low interest loans of up to $20,000. With regard to battery storage, it's grants of up to $5,000 and low interest loans of up to $10,000. So straight away rolled out across the country, there's an immediate positive impact with all of that solar going on. Power's able to be generated and stored at the point of use and excess fed into the grid, as you well know. The significant costs associated with network upgrades are not eliminated, but they are actually reduced. And guess what the really powerful thing about that is? The people who are generating the power and the people who are storing the power are, for the first time ever, the people who are actually using it. We actually become very powerful players in the electricity game. This is community batteries, so the excess power can be accessed by the relative few whose roofs preclude it, and the capacity to use your reverse cycle air conditioning through the depths of winter and the heights of summer when you need it.
So this is actually a really important thing about enabling people to take control of their own bills and make decisions for their own lives and their properties. So as Joanna's mentioned, the community batteries are a really good way of people who don't have solar access for whatever reason. They might be on the ground floor, they might have a big tree over their house, they're unable to actually generate their own electricity in that way. A community battery is a really good way of people being able to access that green energy, but also cheaper energy. And people who have panels who are producing excess energy can feed into the grid and feed into the battery and earn money from that. We've had a very small rollout of that to date, and that needs to be expanded. I did mention that the Housing Trust and Junction, so Junction's a big community housing provider, are actually looking at putting panels and batteries on properties that they have. They're all rental properties for people on low income, so that is a really important part about that equity again. We do have the Australian Renewable Energy Agency that we have asked to do some more community electrification demonstration projects. So there are suburbs where we are looking at electrifying the entire suburb and seeing how that works for people across the country and whether that is something that is financially viable to be rolled out. And finally, the bi-directional EV charging. I really can't underestimate or undersell how important that will be when that rolls out. So that means everybody who's got an EV car will be able to have that as a mobile battery. So you'll be able to save money by that money going into your battery during the daytime, and then you sell it back into the grid when you get the really good prices at night. Down the track, we will be able to do that on a much larger scale. So for instance, you might be able to go to work and park in a car park and have an entire building next door to you running off the batteries from EVs. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, sorry. I was getting a bit ahead of myself there.
Kate doesn't want to hear about my battery plan. Just to, again, recap on what our approach is on energy or I hope, when a Liberal government is elected federally, double renewables, triple storage, gas in the short term, nuclear in the long term. So, tripling storage, obviously, batteries are a crucial part of that, and we certainly acknowledge and recognise the importance of household energy storage. If you can be completely energy self-sufficient, then you can cut your bills significantly. So I will just quote from our Shadow Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Ted O'Brien, because he's made some statements on the public record that give an indication of the direction that we're heading. Ted recently said that the Liberal Party understands the importance of practical solutions like household batteries to improve energy resilience and affordability. And we'll have more to say about this closer to the election. So sadly, Ted didn't let me come here and announce what our policy will be today, but I'm very much looking forward to his announcement in due course. He also noted that under Labor, solar panels on people's roofs are already being turned off because Labor have failed to understand the importance of storage options such as household batteries. If we're going to ask Australians to electrify, or if we are encouraging people to choose that, if it's the right mix for their family and their household, then they need confidence that power supply will be affordable and reliable so that they aren't left paying for a system that doesn't work when they need it. So please keep a close eye on our Federal Liberal Party website. It actually has all of our policies, so anything today, particularly nuclear, if you have questions, there are very detailed policy papers that have been available for months that have all of the facts and figures, and in due course, as we announce more policies such as batteries, that will be up there as well.
We're all getting a little bit mixed up with the order there. It is a little bit tricky, I have to say, our round robin. And it is. But, you know, we're getting there. And our next question was on batteries, but I actually feel like that's been quite well answered now. And to ask you to all repeat yourself, I think that would be not really the best way to use our time. So now we're going to move on to a question about nuclear energy. And this might be a controversial one. I remind everybody to keep themselves well mannered. So several audience members such as Rudy in Crayburn Farm and Jamie from Torrance Park raised questions relating to nuclear power, including: is nuclear power a feasible option for Australia? How and where will nuclear waste be handled? Given the long construction time, what will happen to carbon emissions in the meantime? And so, Joanna, you are next to start first, and then we'll go to Louise and then Nicole. Fundamentally, it's a question about nuclear power and whether it's a good idea for Australia or not.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the multi-part question. It's always a great thing to walk into. Okay, so nuclear. We know for a fact that solar and wind power would actually need to be curtailed to make room in the grid for nuclear energy when it does ultimately finally come online, if that's the track that government chooses to go down. So we would actually have to remove renewables power from the system. That means taking away from those of you who have solar on your roof, and I think it was pretty well everyone in the room, wasn't it? That means taking away from you a large amount of the control and the personal choice that you have over your power bill. It means polluting gas and coal power stations would remain active for longer, releasing an extra 1 billion to 2 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide. We do not have the luxury of those increased emissions. This is quite literally the last thing we need. We already know that we have no choice but to cut fossil fuel consumption significantly and rapidly. It's estimated by several experts that the coalition's likely to spend anywhere from $116 billion to $600 billion of taxpayers' money to deliver up to those 14 gigawatts of nuclear energy they're talking about. The plan won't lower prices and it will take too long to build. The so-called cheap electricity that's supplied by nuclear power in other parts of the world is cheap, in inverted commas, only because of the significant taxpayers' subsidies that governments in those countries pay in order to make it so. It's not the cheap form of electricity that they would have you believe. In the meantime, remember those rising emissions if we allow it to be started on. This is actually fiddling while Rome burns.
So nuclear is such a great idea that no bank, no energy company and no international monetary fund will put their money into it. That's why you, the taxpayer, and me, the taxpayer, and all of us have to pay for it. Now, the radical lefties at the Australian Financial Review said that Peter Dutton cooked the books, that's their quote, with the Frontier Report. The Frontier Report that proposed that nuclear, or costed out nuclear, didn't include anything about what it would mean for your power bills. And the other agencies that are looking at it are talking about easily $1,200 more, plus everything that we have to pay in the meantime to prop up ageing coal-fire power stations so that we still have energy until the 15 to 20 years when we get nuclear. So the Frontier Report estimated that we would be using around 40% less energy by 2050. Pretty much everyone else says we'll be using at least double what we are now. And if you know anything about the way we live our lives, if we have increased heat, we're going to need more air conditioning. If we want to have an industry, if we want to have manufacturing, we need more energy, not less. It will take 15 to 20 years to start delivering, and it will only deliver about 4% of the energy we need. So Nicole's now talking about doubling renewables and tripling the storage. I have to say I'm really pleased to hear that. I've not heard that from the Liberal Party previously. So it is good to know that they are recognising that that has to be happening. Nuclear is just too slow to keep the lights on. Under the last Liberal National Party government, 24 coal plants announced their upcoming closures, and 90% of Australia's coal power will close by 2035. We actually have to have energy by then. We can't just wait around, and keeping those ageing coal-fired power stations open, they're not closing because of energy, because of climate change. They're closing because it's no longer financially viable for them. It will cost more.
Who in the room today is concerned about our local environment, our national environment, and our global environment? Just put your hand up if you are. I'm assuming we all are. We're on a unity ticket on this. Okay. So if you are concerned about our environment, but also our economic future and making sure we have jobs and the ability to pay for health and education and all the things that we take for granted in our beautiful country, then forget about nuclear. If you're not worried about all of those things, just forget about it. Because if you are worried about it, which I am, then you have to have nuclear as part of the solution to protecting our environment and protecting our economy. I honestly don't think that Labor and the Greens are actually serious about protecting our environment and our economy and families and households because they refuse to consider nuclear as part of the solution. Now, every single major economy worldwide, all of the top 20, either have nuclear already and have for generations, or they are currently putting it in place because they know it provides the reliable, affordable baseload power, and it also looks after our environment because it's zero emissions. So I'm serious about protecting our environment for future generations, and I'm very serious about protecting our economy so we can afford to continue the incredible lifestyles that we do here. I would encourage you all. I know we have a very educated community here in Boothby. I know you're all really, really thoughtful people. Please jump online and look at our policies. They cover every single aspect of the questions that have been asked here today. So I'm not going to run through them all because I only have another 30 seconds, but it covers waste, it covers cost, it covers storage, it covers lifespan. Nuclear plants have an 80-year lifespan, and I'm very happy to answer questions from any of you. My contact details you can obviously Google or get from me afterwards.
All right, thank you everybody for those responses. Last year was the hottest year in recorded history. Last year we breached 1.5 for the first time, and we know that our planet is getting ever hotter. The year before was also the hottest year in recorded history. And the reason why our planet is heating is because of our dependency on coal, oil and gas. We know that 80% roughly of emissions globally come from combustion of fossil fuels. This is the IPCC saying this is NASA saying this is well-established science. So this is a question particularly about fossil fuels, and obviously fossil fuels are where most of our energy comes from. Lots of questions from the audience came around fossil fuels, about future projects, their cost and their climate impact. Just a heads up, Louise, you're going to go first, and there's kind of two parts to this question. So first we had Tim Voss from Brighton noting that the price of electricity depends upon the price of gas, and gas is the marginal fuel used at times of peak power demand. With the price of gas tripling in the last 10 years, why can't we implement a reservation policy and ensure that gas producers pay a fair amount of taxes and royalties so that all Australians benefit? So the question, first part is really about fossil fuel companies paying their fair share of tax. The second part of the question is, we know that over 3 years ago, the International Energy Agency recommended that governments stop new oil, coal and gas, so all new fossil fuel projects, from 2021 to achieve net zero targets. So, the big, industries and institutions around the globe are telling us that it's time to rapidly quit fossil fuels. So Jim Allen from Panorama has asked, what will your party do to end approvals of new fossil fuel projects that promote climate breakdown? So Louise, you go first, then Nicole, then Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Jim. So just to briefly say, why don't we have a reservation for gas contracts? Yet Western Australia does. It was put in place at the time that they were putting in place the contracts overseas. It's very hard to retrofit one. So if you've sold off your gas, you can't suddenly say, we're cancelling those contracts. We would go back to that we have put in 80 new large-scale renewable projects, and that is a really important part about making sure that our energy transition has sufficient momentum to drive energy in this country in that direction. I do get comments about fossil fuel approvals. So since we were elected, we have had 10 coal extraction approvals and 3 gas extraction approvals, a mix of new projects and extensions. Tanya Plibersek doesn't just choose which ones she likes. There's not just a, how does she feel about it? She has to follow the law. And so the law that we have, the safeguard mechanism, which has the safeguard mechanism criteria, which was voted on in the last Parliament and was negotiated with the Greens, and they voted on this as well and supported, and I'm really glad that they did. That is how Tanya makes those decisions about whether or not she's going to, or has to, approve gas or coal. Doesn't mean you like it, but she has no choice. She has to follow the law. If she doesn't follow the law, then the companies take her to the court, and then we pay a lot of money for that. So we do have to follow the law. I would personally prefer that we did less. And I think the way that we do that is by demonstrating that renewables and storage are the way. They are cheaper, they are effective, they are reliable. Yes, we might need gas as a small backup, but the storage is actually what we need. And that's the way we go forward and get rid of fossil fuels.
I think we need to be realistic about the economic reality that we face. And the reality of power generation that we currently face. So at the moment, fossil fuels are providing, on average, around the nation, around 63% of our electricity supply, and renewables 37%. I've already remarked on, under Labor's plan, they cannot reach their target of 82% renewables by 2030. So we need to be realistic about what is achievable and what timelines, and we, the Liberal Party, are being realistic that in order to replace baseload power, particularly coal, we need to introduce nuclear in the system, which we need to get on with now, so that we have reliable, affordable baseload power that has an 80-year lifespan for the good of the nation. Now, if you want to tax fossil fuel companies more, that will have two impacts. Prices of power will get even higher. We're at a time when prices are at an historic high anyway, and people are under serious cost of living pressure and pain. So increasing tax will just be passed on to consumers, which will worsen the economic crisis that we're currently in. And also, it will reduce the income, the export income that we earn from coal and from gas to nations that will just find someone else to supply those products. So what we will be doing is crippling our national economy, which means we have less money for health and hospitals, education, for our roads, for all of the things that we take for granted on a daily basis in Australia. So I would just urge caution in terms of increasing taxes and immediately ceasing any fossil fuel exploration, because it would have catastrophic economic consequences for our nation.
Well, this is going to be interesting because my notes for this one are literally all over the page, so I'm going to try and get them in the right order. I would like us to offer some help to Louise here, because I've always suspected that Louise has been disappointed by the extent to which the Albanese government has moved on climate and the environment, particularly on climate. So the best way that we can help her out is to have a minority Labor government with the Greens pushing Labor to do better. So I would encourage you to think very carefully about how you use your vote at this upcoming election. Okay, firstly, we know that 1 in 3 big corporations pay no tax. I mentioned that to you before. All of the Greens policies are costed through the Parliamentary Budget Office, and we know that if we appropriately tax those corporations, that brings in $512 billion. It's eye-watering. So, with that in mind, we know that we need to stop new fossil fuel projects, and if we increase renewables, as the Greens plan is to do, we don't need to worry about the fact that most of our gas is going offshore. To actually stop that is another issue, and it would be a fine thing, but let's leave that to one side. What we would end up with is enough gas domestically, because there would be no more requirements for it for homes and businesses. There would be enough gas domestically for those very few industries that can't do without it to actually keep going as they are. It would be doable. And as Louise mentioned, Rio Tinto has transitioned their aluminium smelter across. That's an industry that typically we've been told you can't electrify. So it is absolutely doable. We're on the cusp of a really significant change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody. So as I said at the beginning, I'm a doctor, and the next question is about my favourite topic, which is health. So climate change is recognised by the World Health Organisation as the greatest public health threat of the century. And you may not know, but multiple medical colleges have declared climate change and health emergencies, including the GPs, the physicians, the surgeons. More than 10 medical colleges around Australia have declared a climate health emergency, because we are aware that the health impacts of climate change are affecting our communities now in our work. In South Australia, our health is at risk from overwhelming heat, from drought, from fire, from infectious diseases, from the impact of drought on our local food production, as well as all the mental health problems that go with these things. Certainly as a GP working in suburban Adelaide, I meet many people whose mental health is impacted by climate change. And I also meet many women choosing not to have children because of climate change, and I think that is an absolute tragedy as a parent. So, all things considered, prevention is better than cure. And so how would the candidates, and Nicole, you're first this time, protect the people of Boothby from the health impacts of fossil fuel use and climate change? Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for your care and concern for your patients. Our GPs are under historic pressure, and I am determined, and the Liberal Party is determined, to make sure you can stop stressing about running your practices and actually just worry about caring for your patients and your clients. Obviously, the Liberal Party is committed to tackling climate change in a way that's practical, effective and responsible. We obviously recognise the challenges posed by our changing climate, not just affecting us, but our nearby neighbours, and the extreme weather events that Kate has just touched upon. In terms of mental health support, we have a policy to raise the number of Medicare, fully Medicare-funded mental health sessions that any one person can have to 20. Labor slashed that on their watch. So that is a key policy commitment from us, because supporting people's mental health is absolutely critical, and Kate's just outlined the issues that we are currently facing. In terms of the World Health Organization, I am well aware of the statements that they make on their website, but I also am acutely aware of the leading causes of death worldwide, and climate change is not actually listed in the top 10. So worldwide, heart disease, stroke, lung disease, lung cancer, usually from either tobacco or exposure to people who don't have electricity. They're cooking on open fires in their home. Lung disease from being exposed to burning wood, for example, on an open fire is a key cause of death internationally. Lower respiratory infections from a virus, bacterial or fungal infection are a leading killer as well globally. And something that is dear to my heart, because I am so passionate about women's health issues, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had a miracle health breakthrough, it's neonatal conditions, including where mothers and babies die during birth, is one of the leading causes of death globally, and we, as an educated, caring country, have a responsibility to help women less fortunate.
I'd like to begin by actually acknowledging the work of DEA. I know that you guys just do an amazing job, and you are absolutely under the pump. We know that the environmental impacts, the impacts to health, both mental and physical, of climate change are really significant. There wouldn't be a single person in this room, I'm willing to bet, who's either not feeling those impacts themselves or who knows someone who is. So we really need to do something about it. So the best thing we can do is to stop our dependence on fossil fuels. They impact us right the way along the chain, from the people who suffer health impacts from extraction to the consequences of spillage and so on during transportation, and then those final impacts when they're combusted. They impact every aspect of our lives. Here in Adelaide, we actually suffer the highest death rate for mainland capital cities in Australia of death due to heat wave. That is a direct impact of climate change. That's what the stats show. That's really significant. It's actually quite chilling. I can feel everyone's sort of gone, oh, that's the fact. Fossil fuels kill more people globally annually than tobacco. No government would dream of getting into bed with big tobacco. Why do they insist on handing out subsidies to fossil fuel corporations? It's not good enough. Last time the Greens were in minority government, last time we had a minority government and the Greens were in, we got dental into Medicare for children. Our intention is to get that in for everyone. Our intention is also to get mental health care into Medicare, and we all know how desperately needed that is, and free GP visits.
Thank you, Joanna. I actually didn't know that statistic either. You may know that I worked in the health sector. I was actually one of the leads in primary health care in the 2009 heatwave here in Adelaide, and we did have deaths from that. Generally, the deaths happen when the temperature doesn't go down at night or you can't cool yourself down at night. So people can cope with the heat in the daytime, horrible as it is. It's the night time that actually kills people. And so what we actually need to look at is things like housing standards, enabling people to have good insulation, to have a house that will actually protect them and that will cool down. Certainly affordable energy is a really important part of that, because if you can put your air conditioner on at night, you can cool down and you're probably likely to survive. Some of the other things that were mentioned fires and the pollution that comes from that, but I'd also add into that car fumes. Again, this is something that has a major impact, particularly on those people who live near major roads like Cross Road and Fullerton Road, and the major roads, you know what they are. The particulates that come from burning fossil fuels, but also the fumes, have a really significant effect, not just on people's chronic disease, so children's asthma, that sort of thing, but also on life expectancy. And these are really important things that we need to be looking at and we need to be planning for now. So the more that we can get those housing standards in, so that we actually have good quality housing, affordable housing, but safe housing that is being built, the better we are. The Housing Trust and the community housing providers are all in the process of rejuvenating some of their old stock. When we went through the 2009 heatwave, we were sending people out to Housing Trust properties, those old red brick, semi-Ds, and people had got so distressed they had their heater on. That's how distressing those buildings are. Thanks.
Well, thank you everybody for those considered responses regarding health and climate change. Next we're going on to renting and energy equity. And I'm sure everybody's aware that there's a rental crisis in this country, and the renters are doing it tough and often don't have opportunities to sort of alter their houses and protect themselves in the way that homeowners do. So Matt Martin, who lives in Glandore, notes that 1 in 3 Australians rent. And his question, and Joanna, you're first up this time, is how will you ensure that Australians who rent can access the benefits of solar electrification energy efficient upgrades in the next term of government? Thank you.
Okay, so equity is critically important. We've all seen the gaps that exist between the haves and the have-nots, and they have just grown. The postcode lottery is well and truly alive. We need to ensure that everyone is looked after, and that's a really key plank of Greens policies, because everyone does better. Even the people who are doing very well, thank you very much, and don't need any assistance, they actually do better too when we look after everyone and keep a sense of justice to the fore. So the Greens plans build on the $2.2 billion that were previously secured by the Greens in negotiations with the government for electrification for renters, apartments and social housing. We are going to keep working on that. Community batteries will be of critical importance. We've seen here in Mitcham, for those of you who are actually Mitcham residents, the kind of impact that we can have when a local council starts up a community renewables project. So that was very much about removing upfront costs and getting solar and batteries onto not batteries onto roofs, solar onto roofs and batteries to homes for people. And the idea of that is that excess power can be fed into community batteries. Mitcham Council will be an electricity retailer and able to sell excess power at reduced prices and have control over who that goes to. So there's a huge amount that can be done. We need to think really carefully about how we do it. Virtual power plants will be a really good way to ensure that if a landlord doesn't want to put solar on for whatever reason, that tenants can still access that. But improved standards for rental accommodation will actually be key. So better insulation so that you have less reliance on air conditioning will be a big part of that.
I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but you know, in terms of rental equity, obviously the Housing Trust and the community housing providers provide a portion of that. So working through them, getting them to put solar panels and batteries on is an important part of enabling particularly those people who are in that very social and very low level affordable housing, so those who are doing it most tough in our community. The community batteries is a really important part of that, and I think what you were touching on there with the Mitcham project and the virtual power plant is actually another really important way that not just those who have panels on their roof, but everybody can actually benefit from cheaper green energy. Renters are certainly one of those groups that are most at disadvantage in terms of accessing this, but there are other groups who perhaps live on the ground floor of a unit block, don't have solar access, or have a tree over their, over their house, so they don't have solar access. The virtual power plant actually can help all of those people. I was door knocking a man in, I think it was in Belair, who told me he didn't have solar access, but his next door neighbour, who was an electrician, had told him to get onto Amber app, and he could actually, just by timing when he used his energy, he could save, he was telling me he was saving $400 a month just by using it when there was excess solar going into the grid. He could actually buy it then, and then at night he didn't do anything, so I'm sure he was sitting at home in the dark. Slight exaggeration, but you get what I mean. By timing that, you can actually take benefit from the way the market works without having to have the infrastructure yourself. I certainly do support the concept of some form of landlord incentives. They aren't there at the moment, but that is something that I think we're going to need to get to, given that we do have a fairly high proportion of renters in this country these days. Thank you.
I might just start with that last point then. Why do we have a record number of renters? Because we have an historic housing crisis that is of the making of the federal Labor government. We have federal Labor has let over 1 million people, new residents, into Australia during their term in office. And we shouldn't be doing that if we don't have enough homes for Australians and residents who are already here, let alone the people that we would like to welcome here. So I would encourage you all to look at the Coalition and the Liberal Party's housing policy. It is very detailed, it is very comprehensive. We want every single Australian who wants to buy a home to be able to buy a home. We want to get house prices down, we want to increase supply, we want to get rental prices down because they have spiked, and Adelaide is the second least affordable city in which to live now in terms of housing. Power prices are obviously a key part of that as well. And another key part of it is, and I'm sure this will be as poorly received as my earlier comments, but the union influence and lawlessness and impact on our builders. And I had a gentleman speak to me this morning about this when I was at Mitcham Shops, and he said, Nicole, can you please get the unions under control again, because we are paying literally a 30% union tax because they are forcing us to make payments that are not legal, And that is what is increasing the cost of every single house and apartment that we try to build. So I would just please encourage you to have a look at our housing policy and our cost of living policies, because the other key thing is to get inflation under control, get power prices under control, so people can afford to buy their own home.
All right, so we're up to the last question on our forum on affordable energy, but I would actually encourage everybody to go to the different parties' websites and have a good look at their policies. And, you know, to pick the topic that's most interesting to you and just have a look at them and, you know, see what they've got written down on their computers in black and white for us all to see. Regarding energy market, several registrants asked about why we as consumers aren't seeing the benefits of cheaper energy. And our next question is from Andrew Tidswell, who is currently involved in a local program to help people reduce their energy bills. His question is, how will you stop energy companies from overcharging with complex contracts and low solar feed-in tariffs while sending profits overseas? Louise, you're first up this time, and then after that we'll have closing remarks from the candidates.
Well, I mean, ultimately the reason that we have high energy prices is because we have a privatised energy market, which means we have generators, we have transmission, we have distributors, and we have retailers. And each one of those has to make a profit because they're private companies. So when the Olsen government sold ETSA off in 1999 for $3.2 billion, that's the result. That's what happens when you privatise utilities. If it was still a government entity, then they just have to break even. They don't have to make a profit. Each one of those entities is involved in delivering energy to your door, and they have to make a profit, and that's why you're paying so much. If you're going to have centralised energy of any sort, any generation, then that's going to be the same. And that's why having solar and batteries on your roof or in your local environments or through the virtual power plants is so much cheaper. If you're going to build nuclear power plants in 20 odd years, you still need transmission. You still need distribution. All of those things that allegedly cost so much still have to happen because the energy still has to get from wherever it's being generated actually to your door. So that's why we have such expensive energy prices. I can't remember what the rest of the question was. So it is really hard to say, how do you unscramble the egg? How do you stop energy companies from overcharging? In terms of the complex contracts, there is a website called Energy Made Easy, where you can put your IMR number off the top of your website, off the top of your last electricity bill, put it in there, and it will tell you for your consumption of electricity, can you get a better deal? The ACCC says 80% of Australians are paying more than they need to because they haven't checked their bill recently. So that is at least something worth doing.
Okay, so under Labor's plan, as it is, we will see 90% of Australia's 24/7 baseload power forced out of the system by 2034 with no plan to replace that baseload. We will be vulnerable to blackouts, further instability, and the price hikes and spikes that we are already seeing. So, in contrast, our plan is very clear, and I would again encourage you all to look it up. I'm happy to correspond with people or answer questions if you have it about our plans, which are all on the public record, which are all clear and accessible. So our plan is to ensure that as the coal-fired power stations are retired, and we know that they are retiring soon because they are at end of life, we plan to replace them eventually with zero emissions nuclear, and in the short term with gas, but also, as I've said repeatedly today, our plan is to double renewables in the system and to triple storage. So we have what I think is a very responsible plan. It's a comprehensive plan, and we are going to try to get prices down, because it's one of the biggest stresses for households at the moment is power prices, and it's what's keeping our grocery prices high and cost of living and cost of doing business very high as well. In terms of electricity and gas prices, just to again get back to the facts, they've gone up by 32% without rebates and 36% respectively as at the end of last year, and they're going up again. Here in South Australia, we have the highest power prices in the nation. We have a great amount of renewables, but we have nothing to underpin them. So it's our plan as the Liberal Party to make sure that we do have the ability to produce and supply cheaper power, consistent power, and cleaner power.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not in favour of no emissions nuclear. I would much prefer to stick with no emissions renewables. There's a review being done, the Nelson Review currently, into the electricity market, and they've identified at this point that there are some changes that are actually urgent. They're to do with new capacity and new technology, and they're going to have their interim report out soon, and their focus is on actionable recommendations that are quick and that will make a real difference to consumers. So things are changing. As I said previously, the majority of generation and storage infrastructure is ultimately being owned and will continue to be owned by ordinary people like us. We need consumers to be active participants in the market, and we need to encourage them to generate their own power at the right time. Current investment in transmission upgrades is adding to the prices that we pay, but this is a legacy piece for our children and grandchildren. Along the way, we'll get stronger connections, a stronger network, and that's a network that will be less vulnerable to blackouts. That's what we'll hand over to our children, along with close to 100% renewables. That seems like a pretty good deal for the future. In my book, that's looking a lot rosier than a nuclear future. We need an energy market that works for the needs of consumers. As Louise pointed out, handing over government assets, public assets that we owned, to private corporations is always a dud deal. Often there's significant amounts of taxpayers' money pumped into these assets before we sell them to make them more appealing to the private sector, who are not there out of the goodness of their hearts, but are there to make a profit. So we need reliable power to the country in its entirety, not just to our cities, but to our regions as well. In the meantime, check the front of your bill where it will tell you how much they estimate you can pay on Plan X.
Plan X. Sounds interesting. It's always love the X, interesting letter. All right, there are all our questions done. Thank you everybody for being here and paying attention. I know it's been a lot. We're going to give our candidates one last chance to give you their closing pitch, so closing remarks, 2 minutes again each, and then, come out to the foyer, have a chat with the people on the stalls, have a cup of tea and a bicky, all of that sort of stuff. And we'll go Nicole, then Joanna, and then Louise. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, and again, thank you for all of the time you've put towards this forum today, and thank you to everyone who has all of you who have given up your afternoons to be here. What I'm actually really excited about at the next federal election is Australians have the clearest choice and policy differentiation between the Liberal Party, Labor and the Greens that you've had in probably a generation or so. So I would just encourage you all, as Kate has earlier, to actually jump online, look at all of our policies and email us or give us a call and ask us questions, because especially on the issue of power generation and the future of power supply, and our environment and our economy in Australia, there is a very clear point of difference. Again, to reiterate, the Liberal Party is proposing to double renewables, triple storage, have gas in the short term to provide baseload power, and nuclear in the long term to underpin baseload power for the next 80 to 100 years. I am worried about our economic future and our environmental future, but if you're not worried about our environmental future and our economic future, then forget about nuclear. You've got a really easy choice at this election. You can make a different policy choice, but I am here because I believe in our plan, I believe in the future of our country, I believe in looking after our environment, but I also believe in making sure that every single Australian has the money that they need to live their lives so they can make the choices that they want to make for their life, and also so that the federal government can afford to provide healthcare, education, and the essential infrastructure that we take for granted in our very, very lucky country.
Okay, firstly, a big thank you to everyone who has got together, given up hours and hours of their time putting this together, volunteered and turned up. That's all of you who've turned up this afternoon. Democracy is in really good hands. We're at a turning point. So I thought at the last election in 2022, when I rolled out the Climate Action Now campaign across Boothby, I thought things were going to change. And they haven't changed to anywhere near the extent that we wanted and needed to see them change. And that breaks my heart. So this election is more important than any election we have previously had. Your vote is more powerful than it has ever been before. So I would encourage you to do your homework, to think really carefully about what you do, and remember the preferential voting system. There is no such thing as a wasted vote. Remember that a minority government is actually really powerful. That's when we get the best results because people have to negotiate. All the polls are telling us it's highly likely to be a minority government. And in terms of economics versus environment and climate, remember that 1 in 3 big corporations currently pay no tax. If we tax them appropriately, we can have a healthy environment, we can have strong action on climate change, and we can have an economy that actually thrives with the creation of new jobs. There are thousands of jobs to be created in the transition to renewables. So all of that is in your hands. This is a fantastic opportunity and I hope that you use it wisely, and I would be more than happy to chat with anyone who would like to catch up afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to reiterate, thank you all for your interest and your time coming here today, and particular thanks to the organisers. We finally found something that I can agree with Nicole on. You actually do have a very significant choice between the two parties. On the one hand, we have the Liberal Party, which oversaw the announcement of 24 coal-fired power plant closures. There's your 90% baseload leaving the system. 22 energy policies, didn't land a single one. They're offering you nuclear, which the banks and the energy companies have told you is not viable because they won't fund it. It will put your power bills up, and it's based on a 40% reduction in energy usage. That is not going to drive our houses, let alone businesses and industry and the economy. On the other hand, we have the Albanese Labor government, which has already ticked off 80 new large-scale renewable projects, generation and storage, enough to power 10 million homes. This is what we're doing to drive a superpower of the future. We need that energy in order for our industries and our economy to grow. You may not think that's enough, and I'm certainly keen to see more, and I will drive more. You know me, or some of you know me, you know that I'm here to make sure that that happens. If we get a Dutton government, it all goes away. Everything that we've achieved goes away. all of the renewable projects, all of it goes away. And a vote for Nicole is a vote for Peter Dutton and for a Dutton government. So think really seriously. I know there are some of you in the room who, prefer one or the other, and I accept that that is democracy. But think seriously about what's at risk for our community and our country and our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody. Thank you so much for keeping your manners. I think we did a really good job because it is hard topics, it's highly emotional, but we've seen how the breakdown in democracy has happened across the planet. We certainly see the concerning stuff coming out of the US at the moment, and we don't want to follow that country down that road of division. So it's over. Come to the stalls, come and have a chat. Our candidates kindly have agreed to stay around to have a chat with you all, have a cup of tea and a biscuit, and we'll go from there. All right, thank you, bye.